Good evening and welcome to Tampa. My name's Stephen and I am an alcoholic. And I also have the privilege of being your MC for this amazing series. Thank you all for coming and helping to keep our beloved Dr. Bob and Ann Smith alive. Can we open this workshop with a moment of silence, followed by the serenity prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. A few housekeeping items. If you are having technical issues or know someone who is having trouble getting connected, please send a chat to our tech support committee member and she will assist you. We have an incredible evening planned for you, the first of 4 wonderful weekends. My wife Cheryl and I have been privileged to be non-managing trustees of Dr. Bob's House for the past 6 to 7 years. And our event is usually a one-day long event held in Tampa each year in January. A hot breakfast and a lunch is usually included. And at this time, normally, if this was a normal event, I would have invited you to help yourself to breakfast and tell you where the restrooms are. I'm going to assume that for today, you can find these yourself. We are going to be recording this audio portion of the meeting, and we'll make it available to you in the future. It will be posted on our Old Time AA private Facebook page. Make sure you are a member of this page to get access to the recordings. To gain access, just search on Facebook for the private page Old Time AA. Dr. Bob's House is an historical landmark, and with the support of the membership, there are 2 other neighboring houses that have been purchased to give us room for our beloved archives and a place to share gifts and fellowship. For those that have not visited the house yet, we will be taking you on a tour there at the end of the month. If you are interested in supporting Dr. Bob's House, we have made it easy for you. Daniel, could you put the QR codes up on the screen? You can click on one of the codes with your camera, and it will take you directly to Venmo or PayPal. Daniel's also posting a link to PayPal in the chat room for easy access. Now, I would like you all to please sit back, get comfortable. We're going to kick off this event with the chairman of Dr. Bob's House, longtime member of AA, and wonderful friend, Harmon V. Harmon, you're on, buddy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I think we're ready here. I don't know if we're spotlighted yet or not. Okay, let me see here. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Good evening, everybody. My name's Harmon V, and I'm an alcoholic. And before we go ahead and get started, I want to thank Cheryl. I want to thank Stephen. I want to thank all the non-managing trustees, and that is a arm, if you will, of Dr. Bob's Home Incorporated here in Akron, Ohio. And they serve a vital function. The basic structure of the house, real quick, would be a group called Managing Trustees. At present, there's about 7 of us. And then we have the non-managing trustees that have been mentioned, and they are a group of people that are dedicated to the preservation, the restoration, and maybe more importantly, that the goodwill of Dr. Bob's home, and that's Annie's home and the kids' home here in Akron, Ohio. Without the non-managing trustees, we would not be able to function. Dr. Bob's Home basically is a volunteer organization. We have 1 paid employee, and the rest of it consists of about 60 volunteers. So it's boots on the ground, if you will, and it's for the love of the game. And I want to thank all of the people that have been here presently that has anything to do with Dr. Bob's Home. I want to thank the past members that have been before us that have paved the way to where we're at tonight. Actually, Gail, I saw you on the screen earlier and you can see where I'm at. This is a little, I'll move out of this way. This is one of the buildings that Steve talked about. We just got this a couple years ago, and it's called 122 Everett. And this is called the AWE Center, the Archival Center. It's going to be the Welcome Center, and it is the Educational Center. And the reason that I chose this tonight, because later on in the month, there is a tour that's scheduled. And then I believe the last evening, the speakers will actually be in Dr. Bob's home. But I just wanted to, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And of course, we want to thank Almighty God for being able to put us together in this position, and want to thank everybody that has anything to do with supporting the home. And I love the theme, if you will, old time AA. And when Cheryl and Steve told me about it, they said if you would give a little bit of a history of how you got here and what it's like to get sober in Akron, Ohio. And that's where I joke about it. I say I'm from LA, and people get, oh, I didn't know you were from Los Angeles. No, LA is lower Akron. That's where I did a lot of my drinking. That's where I got sober. So I'm going to talk about what old time AA is that I came into, and obviously where it leads to the year in 2020. And I always like to start this way because I came into AA in LA. I found a fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous that had a program called Alcoholics Anonymous, and not because of me, in spite of me, I am sober today. 12,237 days, which is 33 years, 5 months, and 29 days. Put the smartphones away, save you a little bit of time. That's July 10th of 1987. And I thank God when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I came into a time of AA when it was before the PC area, politically correct. In other words, they cared more about my life than my feelings. What I'm saying is when I came into this fellowship, it was delivered, the truth will set you free, and the truth without love is cruelty. We don't need that, but we need the truth will set you free. And little did I know when I came into this fellowship that there would be a lineage to where we're sitting at tonight. And I will go ahead and talk about this. And I know the current environment, if you will, is what it is after 2020 and the beginning of it. But I would like to wind the clock back if we can and say this is not uncharted territory for our fellowship. If I can kind of bring things to proper perspective, when we got started in June of 1935, it was only 15 years after that pandemic called the Spanish flu, and there were 50 million people that had passed away, 675,000 of them in this country. It was only 2 years after the Great Depression, and the unemployment at that time was 24.9, or almost 25 million people. It was 17 years after what was called the Great War, or World War I, and of course we didn't know it was 4 years before the beginning of World War II. So when we started, obviously, it was a very tumultuous time in our history. And I guess it would be apropos to say it would be now, but look at what we have today compared to back then. We have a worldwide fellowship. We have 2 million people. We have the advantage of technology as we're talking here tonight, and the smartphones, and we've had time behind us and so on and so forth. And yes, it has been a journey at this point in time, but at the same breath, I'd like to say that the children of chaos that were born, that Bill called, we've been there, done that. And I would like to read something out of Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, since this is the theme of the Old Time AA. This is on page 136 out of Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. And it was a report that was done by Frank Amos in 1938. Out of the 110 members of the census of that time, 70 of them were from the Akron, Cleveland area. And he made this report, and I'm going to read bullet point number 2 of this report. And it says this, quote, "The AA members of that time did not consider meetings necessary to maintain sobriety, They were simply, quote, desirable. Morning devotion and quiet time, however, were must. I suppose that would fall under the theme tonight of old time AA. And speaking of Dr. Bob's and his contribution, I'm going to go ahead and read something that Dr. Bob wrote to maybe put it in the proper context from this night all the way up until the end of January. And when we're right across the campus here, Dr. Bob said this, quote, I didn't write the 12 steps. I had nothing to do with the writing of them. I think probably I had something to do with them indirectly. Because after this June 10th episode, Bill came to live at our house and stayed there for about 3 months. And there was hardly a night in that 3 months that we didn't sit up until 2 or 3 discussing these things. And it would be hard for me to conceive that something wasn't said at or during these nightly discussions around our kitchen table that influenced the actual writing of the 12 steps. They were much more handy to have in that form. Of course, we had the ideas pretty much basically, but not in terse, intangible form. We got them, as I said, as a result of our study and the effort of the good book, which is the Bible. We must have had them because we learned from experience that they are very important in maintaining sobriety, and we were maintaining sobriety. Therefore, we must have had them, but not in exactly written form as you know them now. But that was the way the thing started off in Akron, and of course, and we grew, of course, and we began to get offshoots. The first one was in Cleveland. I don't remember the next one, but but another one started in Akron, and not too long after that, it's been coming ever since. That is old time AA. Another thing that I feel compelled to read was Earl Treat wrote this. His story's in our textbook called He Sold Him Short. And we know Earl Treat went to Chicago after he was here in Akron and helped start AA there and helped Bill to par down the 12 traditions, the long form of the traditions, to the short form into 200 words so they could be read at the meetings. But I'd like to read something out of his story about, and this would be old time AA. He said, I stayed in Akron 2 or 3 weeks on my initial trip, trying to absorb as much of the program of philosophy as possible. I spent a great deal of time with Dr. Bob whenever he had time to spare, and in the homes of 2 or 3 other people, trying to see how the family lived the program. Every evening we went at the home of one of the members and had coffee and donuts and spend a social evening. The day before I was due to go back to Chicago, a Wednesday, I went down to Dr. Bob's office. It was his afternoon off. We went down to the office and we spent 3 or 4 hours formally going through the 6-step program as it was at that time. 1, complete deflation. 2, dependence and guidance from a higher power. 3, moral inventory. 4, confession. 5, restitution. And 6, continued work with other alcoholics. Dr. Bob led me through all these steps. At moral inventory, he brought up some of my bad personality traits or character defects, such as selfishness, conceit, jealousy, carelessness, intolerance, ill temper, sarcasm, and resentment. We went over these at great length, and he finally asked me if I wanted these defects of character removed. When I said yes, we both knelt at his desk and prayed, each one of us asking to have these defects of character taken away. This picture is still vivid. If I live to be 100, it will always stand out in my mind. It was very impressive that I wish every AA could have the benefit of the type of sponsorship that I had, a sponsorship today. Dr. Bob always emphasized the religious angle very strongly, and I think it helped. I know it helped me. Dr. Bob led me through the restitution step, in which I made a list of all the persons I'd harmed and worked out ways and means of slowly making restitution. That would be old time AA. And before I go ahead and get started, Dr. Bob's own words were this. In his story, Dr. Bob's Nightmare, he said this: I spend a great deal of time passing on what I learned to others who want it and need it badly, I do it for 4 reasons. 1, a sense of duty. 2, a pleasure. 3, because in doing so, I'm paying the debt to the man who took the time to pass it on to me. And 4, because every time I do it, I take out a little bit more insurance for myself against the possible slip. That indeed is old time AA. So when I came into our fellowship, July of 1987, unbeknownst to me, I was doing a talk, this was a few years ago in Paris, Ohio, not Paris, France. Anyhow, I was talking about my sponsor, a guy named KC. And KC and his wife were instrumental. They were with Gail, who's on the screen tonight, and a lot of our other old timers. And Tom, that's going to be talking at the end of the month, he was on the board back then. But anyhow, I was talking about KC, and she goes, "Do you know about KC?" And I said, "No, but I'm sure you're going to tell me." And she said, "I will." She said, KC's sponsor was a guy named Bob Bennett. Bob Bennett's sponsor was a guy named Dr. Bob. So oddly enough, my lineage goes back to Dr. Bob. So what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? Absolutely nothing other than I'm a drunk from Akron, but it's a great story and it's a true story. So really everybody's lineage can be tracked back to the house next door, if you will, the campus of Dr. Bob's home, as we affectionately call it. And that not too far-fetched of a story that everybody came from our co-founders. And I am so blessed and so grateful to be in the cradle, in the birthplace of Alcoholics Anonymous. I just absolutely love it to death and am very, very proud of our heritage or our DNA, if you will. So with that being said, I always like to start where it kind of began, and I'll finish up where it's ending here tonight. And the old time AA, if you will, I was spoon-fed Alcoholics Anonymous 2 different ways. The Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's when we came into AA back in the day. That's how we had a lot of it. And then later on, I was spoon-fed the textbook or the program called Alcoholics Anonymous through our textbook, through a lot of great teachers. Anyhow, when I came into the fellowship, you'll remember this too. There was this guy who used to have this gift for these old timers, and or he was one of the old timers. I call him a pack of dogs. He would get us new people together, and he'd go, "You're sick, sick, sick," and I used to get mad, mad, mad because it was true, true, true. That guy's name was Leo. Leo, and you know who I'm talking about. Anyhow, what Leo was trying to tell me that alcoholism was a threefold illness. I'm sick in body, I'm sick in mind, and I'm sick in soul. And what was so important to me was obviously I can't treat a problem until I understand it. In other words, I was around AA twice. It wasn't until I came in AA that it clicked. In other words, I was trying to treat something that I didn't know what I had. Alcoholism is a lot more than drinking too much and getting in trouble. Granted, that may happen to you, but even that doesn't happen to you if you are an alcoholic. It may not. And a lot of times we may be losing people. It reminds me of this one prayer, if you will. I call it the real prayer of the day, that is going to be the subject of what we're going to talk about tonight, and it's about alcoholism. Anyhow, it's called the Real Serenity Prayer, and I go like this. So far today, God, I've done all right. I haven't gossiped. I haven't lost my temper. I've been grumpy, nasty, or selfish, but in a few minutes, God, I'm going to get out of bed, and I'm going to need all the help I can get. Amen. And the reason that I say that's our Real Serenity Prayer, our textbook talks about what is wrong with me. Alcohol is but a symptom, the bottle is but a symbol. I suffer from alcoholism, and it's a lot more than drinking too much and getting beat up, cut up, stitched up, losing jobs, houses, and families, and cars, and all that. All that happened to me, but that doesn't make me an alcoholic. That's going to happen to anybody who drinks too much. The Leo who told me you're sick, 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 he set the stage of what I can understand what alcoholism is. Because once I understood it, then I can accept it, then I can surrender to it, then and only then can I treat it. Putting the plug in the jug and sitting in an A meeting cannot, does not, will not produce recovery. It may produce undrunkenness, but an alcoholic of my type, that doesn't work. That's called suicide. I did that because it doesn't treat the causes and conditions of alcoholism. So when he explained you're sick, 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 little did I know that he was laying out the formula, if you will, in our textbook called Alcoholics Anonymous. And by no mistake, it's in the doctor's opinion that tells me why I'm sick, sick, sick. The first thing is the physical factor. And it says it explains a lot of things I couldn't account for. This explained a lot of things to me that I couldn't understand. I knew it happened, but I didn't know why. He says in our book that I am allergic to alcohol. Abnormal reaction. Most people ain't got it. 9 out of 10 people don't have this reaction. 1 out of 10, like me, got it. This has, is, and always will be. When I take a drink of alcohol, the only thing I can guarantee after that is a physical reaction that he refers to, a phenomena of craving, a physical craving. My body takes over and demands a second drink. My body takes over, and guess what? It doesn't matter how much willpower I want. It doesn't matter how much self-knowledge I have. It doesn't matter how bad I need not to drink, shouldn't drink, what I lost, what I'm going to lose. It doesn't matter. Once I take a drink of alcohol, my body takes over and demands a second drink. So I give it a second drink, and it demands another one after that. So the more I drink, the more I have to drink to satisfy that physical craving. Once I start drinking, I can't stop because of that phenomena of craving is so strong. I don't stop till I'm sick, drunk, locked up, in trouble, or all the above. That's why I'm powerless over alcohol physically. I believe I was born with it because it happened from my first drink and it happened to my last drink. I still got that reaction now, but it doesn't bother me because I'm not feeding it. I'm not taking the first drink. So when I say I'm powerless over alcohol, that's why. Once I start drinking, I can't stop. And I knew that a long time ago, before I heard about AA, before I heard of detox, before I heard of 12 steps, before I heard of God, before I heard about that. I knew if I didn't have the first, I wasn't going to have the 4th, the 8th, the 16th, and the 32, and all the trouble that comes along with it. So if that happens to you, don't take the first drink, right? And we throw that around AA. Well, that'd be real nice. I wouldn't take the first drink if I wasn't alcoholic because I could think to drink through. But I'm as powerless over alcohol mentally as I am physically. Remember, I'm sick, sick, sick. I talked about the body, but here's the mind. I am sick in the mind when it comes to alcohol. I have a mental obsession. I have an obsession in the mind that overrides all ideas to the contrary. That mental obsession, he refers it to an obsession, illusion, a delusion, a lie, the insanity. And that is someday, some way, I'm going to be able to control and enjoy my drinking. I'm powerless over alcohol mentally because I cannot remember what alcohol did to me. I'll remember what alcohol did for me. So when I say I'm powerless over alcohol, I'm powerless over alcohol because no matter what, I will drink again because of my mind. I'm powerless over alcohol because no matter what, when I drink, I can't stop drinking, so I'm going to die. I'm powerless over alcohol because my mind's killing my body. I'm powerless over alcohol because my body's killing my mind. I'm powerless over alcohol because I can't live in a world with alcohol. I'm powerless over alcohol because I can't live in a world without it. But that's only 2/3. Remember, he said you're sick, sick, sick. I explained why I'm sick in body. I explained why I'm sick in mind. But here's the causes and the conditions of alcoholism. I'm sick in soul. I got gangrene in the soul. I got a hole in the soul. Today, I know it's a God hole, but I didn't know what it was. This is my spiritual status of an alcoholic of my sort when I am not drinking. I am restless. I am irritable. I'm discontent, full of fear, guilt, shame, and remorse. I live in a life of terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. I hate you. I hate life. I hate you. I hate me. It sucks, and I need some relief. Therefore, drinking was never the problem. Drinking was the solution. It gave me the sense of ease and comfort that Silkworth talked about. So the problem was sobriety. The problem was life. I couldn't do it. So don't tell me don't drink and you're going to feel better. I feel worse. Sobriety's the problem. Life's the problem. I need a solution for that. Therefore, when you say don't drink, you'll feel better, that's a lie. Like I said, I feel worse. You have to give me a solution greater than what alcohol did for me. Remember, it gave me that sense of ease and comfort that a few drinks bring. But remember, the body ensures there's no such thing as a few. A few is a four is eight, and all that we talk about. So when I say I am suffering from alcoholism, that's what I'm suffering from. It's not drinking too much and losing houses and jobs and cars and all that. Yeah, that happened to me, but I'm suffering from alcoholism. So when I say I'm alcoholic and I suffer from alcoholism, if you take the alcohol away from it, you are describing what the problem is, the spiritual malady of the soul sick alcoholic of myself. And that, when you take the word away, alcohol, with the word alcoholic, what do you got? The word ick. That's what I got. I'm an ick. That's it. When you say alcoholism, you take the word alcohol away. What are you left with? The ISM. And we talk a lot about the acronym of alcoholism. And I'll talk about it. I talk a lot about them right there. The ISM stands for the I for I, the S for the self, and the M for me. The ism for alcoholism is that internal spiritual malady that I talked about. The ism of alcoholism is that mind that I was talking about, an incredibly short memory when it comes to alcohol. The ism that I talked about is I seek misery, and I found it, let me tell you. The ISM is I'm so miserable, and I was. In the ISM, I'll talk about that. Nothing New in AA is where I sponsored myself, where I worked my program. So that's what alcoholism is. If you're going to get that, if you got that, you will seek some relief. And I have 3 treatments for my alcoholism. One of them's to drink. I did that for 17 years. That was the solution, never the problem. When that didn't work, July 10th of 1987, we talk about these 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as the result of spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, the spiritual awakening, appendix 2, the 13 different words change. That's door number 3. Our door number 2, and door number 3 is if I don't do one of those 2, I will take my own life. I will blow my brains out. Those are my 3 treatments for alcoholism. So that's what I say, and I can even fall back into that trap of alcoholism today about the blame game. I was talking to somebody earlier today about being a victim. I can even fall into that in this thing called recovery. You ever blame somebody for how you're feeling? Oh, she did that. They didn't do this. He said that, blah, 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 blah. That's right. That word blame, the last 2 letters spell M-E. So that thing is, when I've got one finger pointing out, I've always got 3 fingers pointing back at me. I am the problem. I've been the problem. I always will be. He tells me that selfishness, self-centeredness, that's the root of my troubles. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. My troubles are all making. My problems are all making. Victims don't get better. Victims stay sick. How I know that? I was a victim for 32 years until I joined this fellowship and I got the message. Once I owned my own alcoholism, it no longer owned me. And what I'm saying about that is I came into this fellowship as a professional victim. You know, the pour me a drink. I stayed in my own self-pity and blamed people, places, and things. Always waiting for the right job, the right person, the right woman, the right everything to come along. And guess what? It doesn't work that way. Recovery's inside out. When the second soul is addressed, then we straighten out mentally, then we straighten out physically, the 3 world around, the third world dimension. That's what we're talking about alcoholism. Anyhow, you know, I joke about it. When I came into this fellowship, I was a professional victim, and you know what? I came from alcoholic home. And you know what? Mommy and daddy were alcoholic. My older sister's alcoholic. She lives out in California. She's got 35 years. So in my immediate family, the only one that wasn't alcoholic was my older brother. I tease him today. I said, dude, I guess there's a loser in every family. And he takes it pretty good. But anyhow, alcoholism didn't run through my family. It spread. And I believed it was my childhood that made me the way I was. Let's look at the fact of the matter of this. It doesn't matter what mommy and daddy did for me, to me. Doesn't matter how it loved me, didn't love me. Doesn't matter what they gave me, didn't give me. Doesn't matter what kind of parents they were. Unless I want to stay sick, stay a victim, I need to look at one thing and one thing only. What kind of son was I? And our book talks about that. As a rule, we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. So if that childhood, living in that alcoholic family wasn't bad enough, you throw this in, I am genetically challenged. I'm half Irish and half Scottish. Now, you non-Irish people may not know, but we, Irish people, we are born with the DNA with this curse. It's called the Irish virus, and you might want to write this down. We are born with a fear of dehydration. We want to drink everything we can get our hands on. So half of me wanted to drink all the time, and the other half was too cheap to pay for it. Now, God bless them, when I was born in the hospital, they sent me home to mommy and daddy. They meant well, but they probably should have assigned me a sponsor and a home group from the get-go. The point I'm trying to make, I was sick long before I drank. Like I said, I was restless, irritable, discontent, full of fear, all the spiritual malady of a spiritually sick person long before I drank. I would have found my ease and comfort in something, and I found it in alcohol. Therefore, I am powerless over alcohol, and I'm an alcoholic because I drank too long, too hard, too often, because of the spiritual malady, the mental obsession, and the physical allergy. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. So I will not bore you with 95% of my life story, because it has nothing to do with anything other than it's a nice story to listen to, but you can find out that at a different time. So I wasted no time growing up, and I talked about the PC area when I came in to Alcoholics Anonymous, and back in I guess in 2021, they would diagnose a person like me. I think the official diagnosis would be ADD or ADHD. Back in the 60s, they had a little bit simpler diagnosis. It was letters. Let me see, how did that go again? Oh yeah, the diagnosis was ASS. That's what I was. I was a punk. I had a chip on my shoulder, Johnny One Note. I didn't care about anybody or anything. It was going to be my show. I was going to run it. It was my way or the highway, and I didn't care about you or anybody else. And that's how it was going to be. So with that spiritual malady, the only thing missing from the story is my first drink. And my drinking was 17 years of fear, failure, and frustration. One thing I need to bring up from this adolescent time is I met this gal back in high school. I call her an angel of the first degree. She later became my wife, the mother of our 4 beautiful children, and I drugged them through this dance of death called alcoholism. And I had the audacity to tell myself later on, I'm not to hurt anybody but myself. That was a lie. I hurt anybody near and dear to me, especially the ones that love me the most. Then I used to say, I'm hurting the ones that I love the most. That was a lie too. Selfish people don't love, they don't have relationships, they take hostages. I was dying a day at a time. I was dying a drink at a time. And guess what? So were they. I was killing them a day at a time. I was killing them a drink at a time. And that's how this thing called alcoholism works. And the family dynamics, obviously a chapter wife, family afterwards. And we know it is a spiritual malady, it's spiritual sickness. Anyhow, get you out of the formative years, if you will. As soon as I graduated from high school, I went in with my 3 drinking buddies. We all were students at Akron U. That 6-year run, I call that the Animal House years. Now, you older ones may know about that. You youngins go home and Google it. What it was a 6-year party. We all were students at Akron U. The daily routine was get up, party before school, drink my lunch, go to school, sometimes not, get out at noon, drank my lunch, had a job, and of course I found a place where they drank the way I did. Drank till the end of the day at work, came home, drank till I blacked out, passed out, got up the next day and did the cycle over again. That was a 6-year run. And my type of thinking was life was nothing but a party. And I was going to party till the day I died. But let me tell you, that party ended up being the 4 horsemen that Bill talks about in the big book, the terror, the bewilderment, the frustration, the despair. Now, I was still seeing this high school sweetheart, and we were getting a little bit more serious. And she would have some of these meetings where she'd say, I'm a little concerned about how things are going. You need to settle down. And I knew what to do to get the heat off the back. And one day, actually, I was somewhat sober, and I got a letter from the University of Akron. You know, alcoholics don't like to open mail. No good mail or no good news comes in the mail. But I opened it up, And they said, "Dear Mr. Bealey, we've determined your BAC is higher than your GPA, and we don't want you back." They kicked me out of school. So anyhow, the end was near, and she proposed to me. It didn't happen that way. She cornered me at a somewhat sober moment and said, "Marry me or I'm out." Now, I loved her with what I had in the way to hell's paved with good intentions, and I agreed to that. I wanted to marry her, wanted to start a family, and all those good intentions that we have. Being the gentleman that I was, we got married. I kept my end of the bargain for about 6 weeks. Started working up in Cleveland. God blessed me with a great job, Fortune 500 company, beautiful commission, bonus, salary, company car. We saved enough money and bought a house in Cuyahoga Falls, and we weren't even married a year. And she comes home with the news, "I'm pregnant." And I said, "That's great." And we decided that she could stay home because I was making enough money at that time, and she could stay home and raise the kids, however that was going to be, in Shangri-La, right? So anyhow, God blessed us with 4 beautiful children within 5 years, 2 healthy boys and 2 healthy girls. In fact, the girls are Irish twins, which means they're 11 months apart. Somebody said, "My God, dude, why'd you have 4 kids in 5 years?" Well, it's real simple. I had to come home and make up some of the time. So anyhow, I had a couple isms going on back then. I had Catholicism and alcoholism. Every time I came out of a blackout, she was pregnant or we're coming home with the kid, and go ahead and talk to your sponsor about that if you don't get it. But anyhow, the point is this. What I talk about, what I did to them and for them, is a matter of a fact. In other words, my alcoholism is mine, and everything that happened to me was my bad. We were living in this house, and it was everything that a man could possibly want. Like I said, 2 healthy boys, 2 healthy girls, a woman that loved me, Fortune 500 company, the station wagon, the dog, everything but the white picket fence. But this was the state of the nation. Those poor people 24/7 lived under siege. Very rarely I was there. When I was there, the yelling, the fighting, the screaming, the tears, the headache, the heartache, that poor woman, she'd be there when the police were looking for me, the people out in the street. She'd be there when they repossess the car. She'd be there when they turn off the gas, the electricity, the water. She'd be there when the people were hunting me down like a dog, and I'd be out doing what I was going to do. And I would say, "Man, isn't everything great?" And I can't tell you how many mornings I woke up, came to the yelling, the fighting, and the screaming. Thank God I never physically abused them, but verbally, mentally, emotionally I did. And I've got news for you. You can cut deeper with words than you can with a knife. People may forget what you do. People may forget how you treated them, but I guarantee you they won't forget what you say, and you won't forget how that made them feel. And I tell you what, it was a god-awful state. So if I did that to my own flesh and blood and the children that I loved and that woman I loved, well, I was in trouble in every area of my life. Every type of problem you could name, in and out of the jails, the judges, the lawyers, the towing companies, paying the high risk insurance, in and out of emergency rooms, the car accidents, the motorcycle accidents, getting beat up, cut up, stitched up, and but for the grace of God, there go I. So my drinking, we'll get through it real quick, was 17 years of fear, failure, and frustration, living from one jackpot to another. And the only thing that happened between that jackpot is the ante that I was willing to give up ever got increasing. A lot of people meanwhile say their alcohol stole this, their alcohol stole that. My alcohol didn't steal nothing. I gave it everything. Nobody made me drink. I drank because I wanted to, except at the end I had to. Then I was living to drink and drinking to live. And that's the story of my thing called this trouble. A lot of people call it trouble. I don't believe it. I call it's a blessing. When all these jackpots were happening, it was a spiritual shaking. God was trying to get my attention, say, "Come on, boy, you better take a look at it." Anyhow, I had a lot of good luck. The only thing worse than bad luck for an alcoholic is good luck. And it really wasn't good luck. It was a thing called grace. In AA, we hear, "But for the grace of God, go I." Grace is a free, undeserved, merited gift. I believe that. I know it. So it's not but for the grace of God, there go I. It's but for the graces of God, there go I. And more importantly than grace, what I received is mercy. And obviously, somebody out in California said this thing of seconds and inches. And what I'm saying is, so many times from my first drink to my last drink, I saw people dying from this thing. And I always said that can't happen to me. I'm a little bit different than you don't understand. I'm a little bit hipper, a little bit slicker, a little bit cooler than the next guy. I'd wake up and dust myself off and say, "Hey, wasn't that great?" Anyhow, the road started getting narrow, or I started getting these jackpots, and we all knew what to do with that. Anyhow, when I get in these jackpots, I became very spiritual. Our favorite prayer: "God, help me get me out of this mess. I promise I'll never do it again." Use God like a tea bag. What I'm saying, when I was in hot water like a tea bag, I'd say, "Come and get me out." I use God like an insurance policy. When you have a claim, you call your agent up and say, handle it. The rest of the time, and I don't mean disrespect to anybody or Alcoholics Anonymous, but this was mindset. My mindset at that time when I didn't need God, I thought his last name was damn it. The reason being I was playing God. That's why it tells us in our textbook, first of all, we had to quit playing God. Why? Because it didn't work. Anyhow, going down this road, like I said, a lot of things happened and start getting in these jackpots. And you know what? So many people mean well, and they say, well, the alcoholic's in denial. It's not true. Our textbook doesn't use the word denial. He talks about denial in Bill's story about his grandfather in Appendix 2. He uses the word denial, but it's not about alcoholism. Denial is denying the truth. I wasn't denying I was an alcoholic or I was suffering from alcoholism because I didn't know what one was. I didn't know what an alcoholic was. I didn't know what alcoholism is. Therefore, I couldn't deny it. When I was confronted with the truth, I wasn't denying it. I couldn't differentiate the true from the false. The doctor's opinion tells me what's wrong with me. My alcoholic world is the only thing that seems normal to me. I don't suffer from a disease of denial. I suffer from a disease of ignorance. I didn't know that I didn't know. And I reached that point. I couldn't imagine life with alcohol. I couldn't imagine life without alcohol. Reminds me of a story of an alcoholic of my sort who shows up at the doctor and both of his ears are really burnt bad. And this is how I was when I was drinking. Anyhow, this alcoholic shows up at the doctor and his ears are all blistered and just tore up. And the guy says, what happened to you? The alcoholic says, Doc, I can explain it to you. I always come home after work and I have a drink or two and I have my favorite relaxing chair. That's where the TV is. Sometimes my wife will be doing chores. One night she was doing her ironing. I guess I blacked out that night. I drank too much, fell asleep, whatever it was. Anyhow, the phone rang. That's when they had landlines. You youngins go home and Google that. Anyhow, my wife was back in the kitchen. I woke up and came to, and I accidentally picked up that hot iron instead of that phone and burned my ear. And the doctor goes, my God, I understand that, but how did your other ear get burned as bad? That alcoholic said without hesitation, that damn fool called back. The point I'm trying to make when I was confronted with the truth, whether it be my wife, my in-laws, the psychiatrist, the marriage counselor, the priest, my boss, I always blamed people, places, and things, but I believed it. Like I said, and I pursued it to the gates of insanity and death. I'll never forget when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, like I said, I had all these excuses. And I told this one old timer, I said, you know what? I know I'm alcoholic. And he goes, why? I said, I come from a dysfunctional family. He slammed his hand down on the table and said, what'd you say? I said, I come from a dysfunctional family. That's why I'm alcoholic. He goes, you learned that in treatment, didn't you? I said, I did. And I said, the third time, I was proud of that, by the way. Anyhow, he says, let me ask you one thing about this dysfunctional family, boy. I said, what's that? He goes, was you in it? And the other two were just waiting for this whole thing to come down. The other one said, nah, he wasn't going to put the word funk in dysfunctional. The other one said, no, he put the word dis in it. In other words, they wouldn't let me get away with it. And the people were talking about when I come in about enabling. Our textbook doesn't talk about enabling. My people didn't enable me. They loved me. I used them. I don't need any help getting sick. I'm going to take everything you got. I'm going to take your money. I'm going to take your cars. I'm going to take your clothes. I'm going to take your house. And I'm going to take something even more important. I'm going to take your dreams, your hope, your morals, your decency, everything that you live for. You aren't going to enable me. My alcoholism is mine. But remember, once I owned it, it no longer owned me. Bring it till the end, 1985 in the federal courthouse. The gavel goes down. We end up going bankrupt. End up losing the Veely World headquarters that day. That was a bleak time in the history, right? Not only did I make myself homeless, but guess what? I made my beautiful wife. That was her house too. I made her homeless. I ruined my credit. I ruined her credit. But the biggest sin and the saddest part of that day was those 4 little kids. Guess what? It was their house. The big shot, the great I am. I couldn't even feed and clothe the children I brought into this world. In the state of Ohio, there are statutes that you are responsible as a father to a husband for the welfare and the financial means of taking care of those kids. And you know what? I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. Show you how sick I was. I didn't care. Take it a step further. I didn't care that I didn't care. Any type of hope, any type of dreams, any type of morals, that was dead. That was long gone a long time ago. I wasn't living. I wasn't existing. I was dying a day at a time. And the end was still coming up. Long story short, September 20th of 86, I got my first DUI, or my second DUI, got into treatment, and that's when I was introduced to the beautiful Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Today I know A works if you work it, and won't if you don't. Today I know when the pupils are ready, the teacher will appear. The teacher being Almighty God in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, if the pupil's sick and tired of being sick and tired. But I got news for you. I wasn't there for recovery. I wasn't there for sobriety. I was there so I wouldn't lose my wife and kids. I'm not saying that's a bad reason, but I just wasn't done. Back in the 80s in the Akron area, you couldn't get into treatment unless you got a sponsor or home group. Got one, but I didn't use them. And I got a news bulletin for you. You can't, nobody can help you unless you ask or you let them. And I wasn't done. I wasn't sick and tired of being sick and tired. But in come the pack of dogs, the old timers. First one said, you know what, kid, you haven't lost your job yet. YET, you're eligible too. And the same thing, you haven't lost your wife and your kids. I said, you don't understand, I'm different than, yeah. Second old timer came and said, you know what, kid, I've never seen anybody too dumb for A, but I've seen a lot of people too smart. All you smart guys that got an answer, you're going to end up drinking again. I told him the same thing, you don't understand, I'm different than, yeah. Third one came in and said, kid, you know what, give A 6 months your best shot. If you don't like what you find here, I'll buy you a drink and we'll gladly refund the misery and you can go wherever you came from. I told him the same thing, you don't understand, I'm different than, yeah. Sounds like that old Beatles song, youngins, go home and Google that one. But anyhow, when I was in that treatment center, like I said, I wasn't done. Long story short, they brought my wife in for family day and they blew my cover and said if I'm going to get sober, I had to do this AA thing. And you know what? That's when I started working my program. I started sponsoring myself. A week later, it was time to be discharged and they gave me my bill, 28 grand, and they gave me my first big book. That's what it cost me. That's where I started sponsoring myself and I started working my program. And here was my treatment. Put the plug in the jug and go to AA meetings. I'm here to tell you that's suicide. I got sicker instead of getting better. So here was my program, me sponsoring myself. We went to 2 meetings a week, me and my sponsor. We got there at 7:59. If it was an 8 o'clock meeting, didn't want to get there too early. Might hear something that'd help us. Anyhow, in LA, Lower Akron, I slid into the back row. I know today that back row is called relapse row or inventory row. Why is it inventory row? Because I was taking everybody's inventory in that place but mine. I was taking hers, she was hot. I was taking his, he was a chump. I was taking that group. Well, I won't tell you what I thought about them. But anyhow, in relapse row and inventory row, I was getting sicker by the minute because not drinking is not a substitute for drinking. Anyhow, I did that dance of death with my sponsor myself for 6 weeks. That wasn't sobriety, that was sobriety. Anyhow, in relapse row, inventory row, I know that's death row of AA, but more importantly, I found out that's the shoe department of AA. Somebody goes, what are you talking about? Well, in Akron, that's where all the sneakers, the slippers, and the loafers are. Anyhow, after 6 weeks, I stood at the turning point. Remember, I've got 3 choices. Drink for the solution. 2, take the steps, spiritual awakening. Number 3, blow my brains out. You know what I did, I started drinking. Long story short, that run was about 6 months. And I got the same ultimatum from my boss that my wife did, do somewhere else. I went into treatment, that was 21 days. That big book only cost me 12 grand. Here's the end of the work in my program. It was July of 1987. My wife left and took the kids. Reason being, I made her go. Let's call a spade a spade. She didn't leave me, I made her go. I was homicidal, I was suicidal. I was literally choking the life of her and those kids out. She had no choice but to go for them to live. My boss fired me. I was unemployable. He was a personal friend, knew my wife, knew my kids. He had no other choice because I was putting everybody's job in danger. Here's the end of work of my program, July 9th of 1987. I was down 129 pounds, spitting up blood, a body that wouldn't die, a mind that wouldn't live, couldn't get drunk, couldn't get sober. And I was at a point in time where I wasn't going to go back out in the bars. I wasn't going to go back out in the streets. I was done. I was tore up from the floor up. I was beat up from the feet up. I was busted, disgusted. I lived in a world of confusion, delusion, illusion. And it was me and my dog in this house. I know that sounds like a country record. But I said this prayer July 9th of 1987. Don't even know how or why I do today. The prayer was, God, please help me. I died that day. I joke about it. I was born in Akron. I died in Akron. And I was reborn July 10th, 1987, my sobriety date. And this is how I was reborn. I said this and I didn't know where it came from or what it would lead. And this was the gifts that I was given from that day to this day. The first gift that I got was this gift called God. Yeah, that's God, but no, it's good gift of desperation. The desperation of a dying man. And I've got it stronger today than I did 33 years ago. And this is the truth of that gift of desperation. It's either God and Alcoholics Anonymous or die. Because I was around AA. I knew it wasn't a cult. I knew it wasn't a religion. I know they didn't wash your brain. I knew this deal was real. I knew it was spiritually based. So that's what I'm saying, that gift of desperation. Another gift I got that day, and it's stronger today than it was back then. And it's not a moment of clarity. This has got to be a gift every day, I believe. And this gift is where the truth and the honesty intersect. And this is the truth of alcoholism and how it was delivered. I got into treatment. You get there, you have a side room. The side room, there's a shiny thing. And the shiny thing, there's a creature in there. That side room is a bathroom. That shiny thing's a mirror. And as I got closer to that creature, guess who it was? It was me. And this was the gift that I was given. And the first time as a 32-year-old man, I looked at the guy in the glass and all the yeah buts, the BS, and everything was stripped away. And this was the gift and is the gift. I am the problem. I've been the problem, and I always will be. I knew it was the answer was God and Alcoholics Anonymous. So what do? I go out there, and who's waiting for me? The pack of dogs, the old timers. So I asked them about God. And they said, "Oh, it's real simple, kid. All you need to know that there is a God." I said, "Oh, good, I can do that." The second one said, "It gets a little bit harder after a while." I said, "Well, what is it?" They said, "Well, there is a God and you ain't it." And then we started having problems. I came into A well balanced. I had a chip on both my shoulders. Anyhow, the third one was out there. It was almost like a script. They said, "Oh, by the way, kid, you got to pray to God." And I came in with that attitude on my shoulders. I said, "Why do I got to pray to God?" All three of them in harmony said, "Because he likes to hear from strangers." And this is the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, and this is how it was delivered. Either God is or he isn't. God's everything or else he's nothing. And I found out I got to give time. I didn't get sick overnight. I'm not going to get well overnight. Recovery is an event. It's not a process. God doesn't shut one door without opening another. I asked them about this God feller, and they joked about me. And I said, "How do I stay sober?" They said, "We've been waiting." HOW, Appendix 2, the Essentials of Recovery. The H for honesty, open-minded, and the W for what length. Another one told me, said, "You got to follow the simple map." And I shook that book. I said, "There's no map in there." And they started laughing. They said, "No, no, no. MAP for you, kid, is M for AA meetings, A for the activity of the fellowship, not to be confused with the action and steps, and obviously the P for the power of prayer." They said, "You better get some spam, boy." And that's not the stuff on the computer. They used to sell it in a can. I said, "I hate that." And they said, "No, no, no. SPAM, S for steps, P for the power of prayer, A for the action and steps, and A for the activity of the fellowship and meetings." They said, "It's not what you know, boy, it's what you do. It's easy to talk, but walking the walk's a lot different." Long story short, and this is how the fellowship was given to me. Went to this halfway house and they spotted me walking in the door and they said, "Get over here." They said, "You got a bad attitude. You got to get an attitude of gratitude." And gratitude is not a noun. It's not an adjective. It's a verb. You don't ever tell me you're grateful. You keep your mouth shut. You do something for somebody. It's easy to talk, but walking the walk's a lot different. What you do speaks so loudly, boy, nobody's going to hear your words. Your words are background noise anyhow. People aren't going to listen to you. They're going to watch you the way you walk. They're going to watch not how you talk. They told me faith will move a mountain, but you better bring a sponsor, you better bring a home group, and you better bring a shovel. And I suppose that's why when it talks in our book, faith without works is dead, he uses that 6 times. And that came right out of the living room, right across the way, that you're going to find out in a couple of weeks. Anyhow, when I was in this treatment center, they taught me this prayer. And I tell you what, it's life-changing. It applies to everything in life. But it goes like this. Thank you, God, for what you've given me. Thank you, God, for what you've taken away. Most of all, thank you, God, for what you left me. Thank you, God, for what was, the pain, the agony, the hell, the torture of alcoholism. Thank you, God, for what is this day of sobriety, and thank you, God, for what will be. And they said, if you want a helping hand, boy, stick your arms out, and thank God I didn't lose my arms and my hands. They said, what do you got? And I said, 2 hands. They said, that's exactly right. You got to do the possible. God will do the impossible. And here's what I found out in my short time in Alcoholics Anonymous. With God, all things are possible. God is good. God is great. I could never carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous long enough, well enough, hard enough, good enough to tell you how my life has been. And don't get me wrong, 33 years, I've had a lot of opportunities to grow. Some people might call it problems or troubles, no such thing. What I'm saying is when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I had absolutely nothing. Today, I am a millionaire, not in money, but in things you can buy. And here's what happened with what I'm saying about the power of God. I found out where my wife, soon to be ex-wife, was because she got to 30, the marriage was over. I was well enough. I wanted to set her free. I wanted to set those kids free. I wanted to be a father finally. Joint supervision, CSB, courts, whatever they were going to give me. It was my bad. I accepted that. Anyhow, I found out where they were living because I was doing the deal called the 12 steps, the immense process. I knocked on the door where they were living. She answered the door. Boy, she's surprised. I said, can we talk? She hesitated for a minute. She says, I guess so, and then gave me the $1,000,000 question. I said, can I come inside and talk? She really hesitated on that one, but she opened the door. Long story short, we reconciled, and if we make it to this April, we'll be married 44 years. The point I'm trying to make is that marriage was on any type of counseling, any type of therapy, individually, psychology, joint counseling. It was God, Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps that put that marriage together, and it's better than ever before. Not because of me, in spite of me. The girls were 3 and 4 when I got sober. The boys were 7 and 9, and you should see the fine ladies and gentlemen that Almighty God, the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and my wife have raised. I say I was an active spectator of that time. Yes, I was there. Yes, I was the father, and yes, the husband. But my wife and I were talking one day, and I said, honey, you did a good job of raising 5 kids. She goes, what are you talking about? We only had 4. And I said, I was the 5th, and I was the worst. And she agreed on that. But what I'm trying to say is, you know what? Recovery is bountiful. Financial recoveries come, and we're living large houses and jobs and, you know, all that stuff. And you know what? That's all fine and Jim Daddy. But guess what? That stuff, that don't make you happy. What I've got today is I've got a fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank God, where people love me for who I am. They know where I've been, know where I'm at, know where I'm going. More importantly than the fellowship, I've got a program that has given me a design of living that works in rough going. Bill says so eloquently in the 12 and 12, I'm going to be closing up. AA's 12 steps, a group of principles, spiritual in nature, which if practiced as a way of life can expel the obsession and drink and enable the sufferer to be happily and usefully whole. That's a recovered alcoholic. I call it by the book, The 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And like I said, I could never tell you all what God's done, but I'm here to tell you that in Alcoholics Anonymous, where I landed today, as far as being involved with Dr. Bob's, long story short, we're going to tie up the loose ends, was involved in a lot of different areas of service here in Akron, Ohio. And it's real simple to do it. You love what you serve, and you serve what you love. I love God and Alcoholics Anonymous, so I've served. Been on Founders Day, done a lot of things, and I got the beautiful lady on the screen, Gail. Gail was on in this a long time ago when they started, and I had a predecessor that was chairman of the board that was always asking me to come on board, and circumstances and timing wasn't right. Gail and I went to breakfast Saturday morning, and there were 2 people. God bless them. They're both still alive, but they're no longer, actively involved. They're not on the board or anything like that. But anyhow, they told us to state, and Gail and I joined on. And I could never begin to tell you what an experience being here in Dr. Bob's home. And it is coming home. This is your home. This is the house of miracles. This is where it really started. And I promise you, and I guarantee you, when you come to your home, Dr. Bob's home, you too will have the spiritual awakening, spiritual experience that so many have. And I'm here to tell you that the old time AA is alive and well in Akron, Ohio. And the old time AA is alive and well in a lot of parts of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is one of them here. And my time is up, and I want to close up with some of Dr. Bob's last words to us, if you will, out of his story, Dr. Bob's Nightmare. And he goes as this, quote, if you think you are an atheist, an agnostic, a skeptic, or have any other form of intellectual pride which keeps you from what's accepting in this book, I feel sorry for you. If you think you are strong enough to beat the game alone, that is your affair. But if you really and truly want to quit drinking liquor for good and for all, and sincerely feel that you must have some help, we know that we have an answer for you. It never fails. If you go about it with half of the zeal that you've been in the habit of showing when you were getting another drink. Your Heavenly Father will never let you down. Gail and I do a thing on the tradition sometimes, and this is one of the last slides, but I want to go ahead and read this, and it is so apropos for this month. And thank you again, Steve and Cheryl and everybody. This would be Bill Wilson talking about his partner, Dr. Bob. And it's this: never would Dr. Bob have us think him a saint or Superman, nor would he have us praise him or grieve his passing. He could almost be heard saying, seems to me you folks are making heavy going. I'm not to be taken so serious as all that. I was only first link in that chain of providential circumstances, which is called AA. By grace and great fortune, my link did not break, though my faults and failures may often brought on that unhappy result. I was just another alcoholic trying to get along. Under the grace of God, forget me, but go you and do likewise. Securely add your link to our chain. With God's help, forge that chain well and truly. In this manner, Dr. Bob would estimate himself and counsel us. These last three thoughts, and this is what I learned from the old timers, like I said. My experience, thank God, in Alcoholics Anonymous is old time AA from the fellowship, the giants that I had that have gone before me, and of course, the teachers of our textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous. But this one old boy said a couple, three things. He said, if you want to see the face of God, love somebody. There's a lot of people on the screen that I know you, and I still love you. The ones that I don't know, I still love you, and not that kind of love. I'm talking about one love for an alcoholic for another. I've seen a lot of love in this world in my short time on this earth, but nothing more powerful than the love of one alcoholic for another. That's what saved my life. And I owe my life to you. And this one other old boy said about a good AA talk, and I hope it was for you. I know it was for me, and it's not blasphemy. It's a cute story. We need a little bit of levity in this time. He said a good AA talk and an orgy have a lot in common. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, you always feel better when you're done, but you're never quite sure who to thank. So I hope it was a good talk for you. I know I feel a lot better. Last but not least, my name's Harmon Bealey, and I approve this message. I love you guys all. Thank you.
Oh, wow, Harmon. I love you, man. That was outstanding. You lit the fuse. You kicked us off like I knew you would. You know, I mean, if you're going to be talking about Dr. Bob's house, and Gail's not your speaker, the best person to have is the guy who's the chairman of Dr. Bob's board, and I just love you. You know, your time, your dedication, and your hard work to both the house and to AA are just a source of inspiration and joy to me, and I'm sure to many of us. Thank you once again. That was just fantastic. And I saw some of the chats coming in, and I saw some people say, I never heard Harmon so good. He's just knocking it out of the park. So once again, Harmon, thank you so much. And if I could, Daniel, could you throw the QR codes up again on the screen, just to remind everybody of why we're here? Of course, this is a free event, but Dr. Bob's house is built with bricks and mortar and nails, and it does depend on our contributions. So if you can, please consider making a donation. If you can't, we understand, and that's the times we live in. No pressure, but I just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to practice helping Dr. Bob's to be self-supporting. So it'll be there for possibly our kids and their kids to come. I love how you talked about the old time AA, and that's what I experienced when I went to Akron, and I just love it, and that's why Cheryl and I like to go every year. Okay, so at this time, while before we get our next presenter, one of our committee members, Jimmy, has put together a little history challenge for us, and uh, there's no prizes. This is just for fun, but we're going to enable the polling feature. Jimmy's come up with a couple of trivia questions, and they're multiple choice. So we'll take a few minutes and give you guys a chance to answer them, and we'll see uh, how much knowledge everybody has. I can tell you that he sent the questions over to me earlier today, and I didn't know a couple of them, so they're not easy. Jimmy, can you launch the polling? So yes, so this is question one. Bill W.'s sister Dorothy used to play with a friend named Lily. How did Lily's father, Mr. Parent, die? And of course, this is multiple choice. So we'll give you about 60 seconds if you could just want to try it out, and then we'll give you the answer, and we'll see how we did. Um, and I lost my cheat sheet, but that's okay. Wow. 44, we'll go to 60 seconds and then we'll stop it. 49.50, 10 seconds left. All right. All right. So it looks like the winner was he drove his father's Packard through the side of a neighbor's home, smashing into the kitchen. That sounds a little more like Ebby. The correct answer was he had his cap pulled over his ears and he didn't hear the train. And I believe that was from Pass It On. We'll try another one. By the way, that's the question I failed, so I didn't get that one myself either. Nope. I guess Jimmy, I'm going to need your help here, or it's the same question. Jimmy, okay, here we go. Here we go. This is from Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. Victor, a former mayor of Akron, and Lil, the first woman to seek help, began what would later be called the 13th step. At what Akron location? And we see we've got the voting coming in already. King's School Library, Dr. Bob's examination table, Portage Country Club golf cart, Mayflower Hotel laundry room, Kistler's Donuts broom closet, and Reverend Tunk's flower garden. I'd go for the donut broom closet, but all right. We'll end it at 60 seconds. All right. And let's see, we came out with 18 people said Dr. Bob's examination table. That is correct. Let's try the next one, Jimmy. At Bill W.'s anniversary celebration in New York in 1948, dinner chairman Al S. made what mistake? He did not follow the group conscience on the format. He accepted contributions from non-alcoholics. He allowed television reporters to cover the event. He forgot the sobriety countdown. Oh, no. And he forgot Dr. Bob's name. We got about 30 seconds left. The votes are coming in. And let's see, about 15 seconds left. 3, 2, 1. Okay. And the correct answer, the 28 of you, 33% of you got it right. He forgot Dr. Bob's name. Dr. Bob was so anonymous in New York that people in New York didn't even know who he was. Let's, we got time for a couple more, Jimmy. Okay. What was Bill W.'s nickname for Lorraine GM, Ruth Hawk's non-alcoholic assistant at the Newark office, who was hired at $12 a week? Speedy, Winston, Navigator, Gizmo, Whiz Kid, Sweetie Pie. This is a hard one. I believe the answer comes from the book Pass It On. We got about 20 seconds left. Sweetie Pie and Speedy are neck and neck. Three, two, one. Okay. And we are, the correct answer was Sweetie Pie, 30% of you. 27 of you got that right. I personally prefer Gizmo, but Sweetie Pie was the answer. Go ahead, Jimmy. Go with probably about two more. Bill W. and Lois made what discovery several months after finding the body of Bill C., who had committed suicide in their home by running a tube of gas, running a gas jet into his mouth? He had translated the big book into Norwegian. He had broken his anonymity to the Cleveland Plain dealer. He had bought preferred stocks in Works Publishing Incorporated. He had been diagnosed with cancer, and he had sold their dress clothes. And we got about 20 seconds left. Voting is coming in. 5 seconds left. Okay. And the winner is he sold their dress clothes. However, 47% of you thought he had been diagnosed with cancer. So the correct answer is he had sold their dress clothes. One more, Jimmy. What incident happened to Icky, also known as Dynamite Man, when he was commissioned to blow up a certain pier in the Houston Harbor? He did not check to see if anyone was on the pier before blowing it up. That could be bad. He passed out and did not show up for a job. I probably would have done that. He blew up the wrong pier. He decided to fish off the pier instead of blowing it up. He had a spiritual experience unlike anything he had ever known. I think you could probably, I think that could have, any of those answers could apply to most of us. But this answer is from the book, what book is it from, Jimmy?
From A Comes of Age.
Thank you, Jimmy. A Comes of Age.
Page 80.
Thank you. I lost my cheat sheet. Okay. So the results are 38% of you thought that he blew up the wrong pier. That is correct. All right. I don't know about any of you, but I just love taking these little trivia quizzes. We'll do some more in the weeks to come. We do see that some of you are very experienced and knowledgeable members of AA, and we could use, maybe some of you could use a great road trip to Akron. That's what we do every year. Okay. Thank you, Jimmy. Appreciate you launching this poll for us. And by the way, those of you that possibly have seen some of the posters the history posters that were posted on some of the Facebook pages. Jimmy is the man behind that. Okay, I hope you all grabbed your snacks and are ready for the next presentation. This next presenter has prepared a PowerPoint showcasing some of the most influential women in AA. Nancy is coming to us all the way from California. So without any further delay, here is Nancy K. with her presentation titled Women of the Big Book. She's muted, Daniel.
Okay. Hi, my name is Nancy Carvin and I am an alcoholic, and I'm just trying to put this up here. Let's see. You have to back out of here and do this over here. PowerPoint. Let's see. Slideshow. There we go. Hopefully. Can you see this okay?
We can see you, Nancy. I don't see a PowerPoint yet.
No, it's the PowerPoint. Okay, I'm going to have to back out of this again here. Let's see. Let me just start over again here. And
make sure after you select the PowerPoint to click the share blue share button on the lower right.
I thought I did that, but let me just try it one more time. And then share screen, and 1 second here. And then I need to click on the slideshow. Can you see this yet?
No, make sure you click the slideshow and then the share button, and it'll work.
I clicked on the slideshow, and
then click the lower right blue share button.
can you see
there
that?
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me just do the view here on slideshow. There we go. All right.
Nice.
Can you see it right? Taking full screen?
Yes. Yeah, you're good.
Good. All righty. And yeah, as I said, I'm Nancy Carvin, and I'm from Galt, California. Thank you so much, Stephen, for asking me to come and share with Dr. Bob's Akron story and big the home and the whole thing, anything that has to do with Alcoholics Anonymous. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Harmon, for your story. That was just incredible. Great job. And so this is a real honor to participate in this event today. I've been interested in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous since May 24th, 1972. If your math challenge for me, that's 48 years. The story and the big book tell a lot about our history, plus they've had a huge impact on my own sobriety. And I've chosen 9 stories from the first and second edition because they were our women pioneers. Eleanor Roosevelt said to do something every day that scares you. So here it is. Florence Rankin, A Feminine Victory. New York City. Although Jane Sturdivant got sober in 1937 in Akron, Florence was the first woman to get sober in New York, even for a short time. She came to AA in September of 1937. She had several slips, but was sober over a year when she wrote her story for the big book. Florence wrote, when the idea was first presented to me that I was an alcoholic, my mind just simply refused to accept it. Whores, how disgraceful, how preposterous, what humiliation. But I have reached the source of help. It must have been difficult for Florence being the only woman. She prayed for inspiration to tell her story in a manner that would help other women to have the courage to seek the help that she had been given. She was the ex-wife of a man that Bill Wilson had known on Wall Street. She thought the cause of her drinking would be removed when she and her husband were divorced. She wrote, oh, I had them all down, letter perfect, all the excuses, reasons, justifications. What I did not know was that I was being destroyed by selfishness, self-pity, and resentment. But it was Florence's ex-husband who took Lois Wilson to visit her at Bellevue. Bill and Lois got her out of Bellevue, and she stayed at their home for a time. After she left their home, she stayed with other members of the fellowship. Florence wrote, "Oh, I've been taught to realize that there is a God and to love him, but though I've been taught all these things, I've never learned them." Bill put it to me this way: you admit you made a mess out of things, trying to run them your way. Are you willing to give up? Are you willing to say, here it is, God, all mixed up? I don't know how to unmix it. I'll leave it to you. At one point, she was alone and felt like drinking. She read the Bible and prayed, but she said, I did not say I must not take that drink because I owe it to so-and-so not to. I won't take that drink because I'm strong enough to resist temptation. I didn't say I must not or I will not at all. I simply prayed and read. In about a half hour, I got up, was absolutely free of the urge for a drink. But I know absolutely the moment I close my channels with sorrow for myself or being hurt by or resentful toward anyone, I am in horrible danger. I know that my victory is none of my human doing. I know that I must keep myself worthy of divine help. And the glorious thing is this, that I am free, I am happy, and perhaps I'm going to have the blessed opportunity of passing it on. I say this in all reverence. Amen. In part due to Florence having been sober for more than a year, 100 Men was discarded as the name for the big book. She spoke up and said, well, what about me? I'm a woman. I'm not one of the guys. She moved to Washington, D.C. and tried to help Fitz Mayo, whose story in the big book is our Southern friend, who after sobering up in New York, started AA in Washington, D.C. She married an alcoholic she met there who unfortunately did not get sober. Sadly, Florence started drinking again and disappeared. Fitz Mayo found her in the morgue. Despite her relapse and death from alcoholism, Florence helped pave the way for many women who followed. She was in Washington by the time Marty Mann, the next woman to arrive in New York, entered the program. Marty only met her once or twice, but Florence's story in the big book no doubt encouraged Marty. Women suffered too. Marty Mann, New York City. While Marty was not the first woman to come to AA, she was the first to obtain a great length of sobriety and to stay. Marty's first day of sobriety is uncertain, but she attended her first AA meeting at Bill W.'s home in Brooklyn on April 13th, 1939. Marty Mann came from a wealthy Chicago family. She attended the best boarding schools, finished school in Europe, and she traveled extensively. She made her debutante debut in 1927, then eloped with John B. from New Orleans. Marty said he was the town's worst drunk. They were both drunk when they eloped. Marty, whose alcoholism was not as far progressed at the time, could not put up with John's drinking behavior, and they were divorced in 1928. For the next 10 years, she did whatever she wanted to do. For greater freedom, she moved to Europe, to London, to live and ran a successful photojournalism business. But her alcoholism got out of hand and she soon was in real trouble and attempted suicide twice. She tried jumping out of the third floor window. She came home to America broke and desperate, and things got even worse. Marty said, when my friends said that I was drinking too much, they were no longer my friends. Drink had become more important than anything else. It no longer gave me pleasure. It merely dulled the pain, but I had to have it. In 1939, she was convinced she was having a serious mental breakdown and was admitted as a charity patient to Blythewood Sanitarium in Greenwich, Connecticut. Her psychiatrist, Dr. Harry Thibault, gave her a manuscript of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, to read. After reading the first few chapters, she said, I wasn't the only person in the world who felt and behaved like this. I was suffering from an actual disease that had a name and symptoms like diabetes, cancer, or TB. And she had had TB. She exclaimed to her buddy Grinny, a fellow patient, we're not alone anymore. Dr. Tebow persuaded her to attend her first AA meeting at 182 Clinton Street in Brooklyn, New York. At the time, there are only 2 AA meetings in the entire United States. I went trembling into a house in Brooklyn filled with strangers, found out I'd come home at last to my own kind. She rebelled at any thought of religion until a personal crisis filled her with righteous, raging anger. And she was going to get drunk to show them. Then she read a sentence from the book that laid on her bed there. It says, "We cannot live with anger." She wrote, "The walls crumbled, the lights came on, the feeling of impending disaster began to dissolve, and I put into practice the 12 steps. It worked." Despite her relapses during her first year and a half, Marty succeeded in becoming sober by 1940.
Nancy, I need to stop. I need to stop you. I apologize. We are still on the Fitz-Mayo slide. So,
Then what happened here?
yeah, the slides aren't moving.
Oh my goodness. My goodness.
I
Dan-
tried to message you, but it didn't come through. So I thought I better say something.
Daniel, maybe, I don't know what's happened. I haven't had that happen before. It's
Try pressing your right arrows.
I'm using my arrows. Let's see. Do you see that?
Try the down arrow. There we go. Whatever
I'm
you just did.
I'm using the down arrows. Is that
It's working now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, listen, let me run you back from Fitz. Okay, there's Florence again.
Why don't you just start from the beginning?
Okay, going back
I'm
to.
kidding. No, I was kidding.
Okay, oh, thank you. Run you through it. That's first time that's happened. Okay, Florence's Cemetery. There's Marty Mann, and then Blythewood Sanitarium, Fitz-Mayo, Clinton Street. Okay, here we are. We're caught up. Didn't have to go back. Now, thank you for telling me. In 1945, Marty became inspired with the desire to eliminate the stigma and ignorance regarding alcoholism and to encourage viewing it as a disease. She believed that alcoholism runs in the family and education of the disease was essential. Marty was a visionary and a pioneer who took on an unpopular cause during an era when women were supposed to remain silent. With the encouragement and support of Bill W. Marty founded the National Council on Alcoholism, where I first called, through which she was educated the general public about alcoholism. In part, due to Marty's life work in alcoholism, it became seen less as a moral issue and more of a health issue. Marty influenced alcoholism legislation at the state and national levels. In the 1950s, famous journalist and newscaster Edward R. Murrow included Marty Mann on his list of the 10 greatest living Americans. Marty was on the board of the directors of High Watch Farm, the first recovery center founded upon AA principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she had a brief relapse nearly 20 years later from alcoholic bitters. Due to her widespread fame and anonymity breaking, she was reluctant to admit that she had had a slip, and many members covered up that fact for her. Around 1964, she admitted she had drank and began going back to meetings again and being active in the public once more. She never drank again. Marty Mann's public admission of her own alcoholism, her successful experience with AA, and encouragement of others, especially women, to get help contribute greatly to AA's growth. She was the first lesbian member of Alcoholics Anonymous at a time when gays and lesbians were not accepted by society. Her longtime lesbian partner was Priscilla Peck, once a glamorous art director at Vogue magazine, and the fifth woman that Marty brought into AA. To protect the work that she was doing during a period of heavy anti-gay bias, Marty never revealed her lesbianism except to Bill W., her sponsor, and her other close friends. She resumed her maiden name and sometimes thereafter started to identify herself as Mrs. Marty M. This title helped her to cover up her sexual orientation. Marty said the 12 steps gave her more than sobriety. They gave her a glimpse at something she had never known before, peace of mind and a sense of being comfortable with herself and the world. Mrs. Marty Mann died of a stroke at age 75 on July 22nd, 1980. Springtime. Sylvia Kaufman, Keys of the Kingdom, Chicago, Illinois. This worldly lady helped her develop AA in Chicago and thus passed her keys on to many. According to the member list index cards kept by the Chicago group, Sylvia's date of sobriety was September 13th, 1939. Because of slips by Marty Mann, Sylvia may have been the first woman to achieve long-term sobriety. Sylvia was raised in a good environment like Marty, with loving, conscientious parents at every advantage. She had her first drink at 16 and loved what it did for her. She married at 20, had 2 children, was divorced at 23. This gave her a good excuse to drink, and by 25, she developed into an alcoholic. Sylvia said, drink did something for me that was different from the way it affected others. She began making the rounds of doctors in hopes that one of them might find a cure for her accumulating ailments, preferably something that could be removed surgically. Of course, all they found was an unstable woman, undisciplined, poorly adjusted, filled with nameless fears. Most of the doctors prescribed sedatives and advised rest and moderation, whatever that is. Between the ages of 25 and 30, she tried everything. She moved to Chicago thinking a new environment would help. She tried all sorts of things to control her drinking, the beer diet, the wine diet, measuring, spacing of drinks, timing them. She tried to mix unmixed, drinking only when gay, only when depressed, and nothing worked. The next 3 years saw Sylvia in a sanitarium. She wanted to die, but had lost the courage to try. She remarked, I was 33 years old and my life was spent. This was drinking in sheer desperation, alone, locked behind my own door. She felt shame and fear, with no complete escape any longer except oblivion. There was one doctor who did not give up on her. Like all doctors of his day, he had been taught that the alcoholic was incurable and should be ignored. With the alcoholic, they could only give temporary relief, and in the last stages, not even that. The alcoholics were a waste of the doctor's time and the patient's money. Nevertheless, there were a few doctors who saw alcoholism as a disease and felt that the alcoholic was a victim over something for which they had no control. Sylvia's doctor tried everything he could think of, including having her go to mass every morning at 6 a.m. and doing menial charity work for his patients. The doctor apparently had the intuitive knowledge that spirituality and helping others just might be the answer. In 1939, this doctor heard of the book Alcoholics Anonymous and wrote to New York for a copy. After reading it, he tucked it under his arm and called on Sylvia. That visit marked the turning point in the life of Sylvia. He must have studied the book carefully because he took its advice. The doctor explained that alcohol was no respecter of age or background, that most of the alcoholics he had encountered had better than average minds and abilities. Of course we do. Just ask any of us. He also gave her the cold, hard facts about her condition, that she'd either die of alcoholism, develop a wet brain, or have to be put away permanently. Then he told her about a handful of people in Akron and New York who seemed to have worked out a technique for arresting their alcoholism, and he asked her to read the book. Silver remarked that I stayed up all night reading that book. It promised recovery if I do a few simple things to be willing to have the desire to drink removed. Here was hope. Her doctor asked her to talk with a man who has experienced success using this plan. This was Earl Treat, who Harmon talked about. His story in the big book was he sold himself short. Earl was the Mr. T to whom she refers in her story. Sylvia said, I was ready and willing to go into the interior of the African jungles if that's what it took for me to find what these people had. They seemed to have all the ingredients for successful living. Earl suggests that she visit Akron. According to Bill Wilson, she got off to a slow start there and may have also been a pill addict. She took a lot of little white pills, which she claimed were saccharin, and nobody could quite explain why she was so rubber-legged. She said, it'd been many years since I had not relied on some artificial crutch, either alcohol or sedatives. Sylvia stayed 2 weeks with Clarence and Dorothy Snyder in Cleveland. Clarence's story in the big book is the home brewmeister. She met Dr. Bob, who brought other men to meet her. Sylvia Snyder said that the men were only too willing to talk with her after they saw her. Sylvia was a glamorous divorcee, extremely good looking and rich. For Pete's sake, she was getting $700 a month alimony. Looked good. But these attractions probably did not help her with the wives of the alcoholics who were known on occasion to run women out. After meeting Dr. Bob, she wanted to move to Akron, but this caused great concern since her presence there threatened to disrupt the whole group. Even Dr. Bob was uncomfortable with her being there, so she went back to Chicago, where she finally got sober and worked closely with Earl Treat, and she drank on the train. Her personal secretary, Grace Cultus, became the first secretary of the intergroup office in Chicago, the first in the country. By the latter part of September 1939, they had a nucleus of 6 and held their first official group meeting. Sylvia said, by 1955, our membership in the Chicago area alone had grown from 6 members to 6,000. Now there were many to carry on the work. The group did not need us in the same degree it had earlier, but our need for the group had not diminished. Sylvia leaves us with, there is no more aloneness with that awful ache so deep in the heart of alcohol, every alcoholic, that nothing before could ever touch it. That ache is gone and need never return again. We say to the new person, don't take our word for it. Try it for yourself. Only then can you be sure that you've latched on for a design for living that can really work for you. Now there is a sense of belonging, of being wanted and needed and loved. In return for a bottle and a hangover, we have been given the keys of the kingdom. Sylvia Kaufman died on October 31st, 1974. It's my girl Ethel from Akron, from farm to city. She tells how AA works when the going is rough, a pioneer woman of AA's first group. Ethel's date of sobriety was May 8th, 1941. She was the first woman to get sober in Akron. She was the oldest of a very poor family of 7. Her father was an alcoholic. At the age of 16, she was invited to spend the summer with her aunt in Liberty, Indiana, and her aunt told her that she could have boys come over to visit. But there was one that she must stay away from. His name was Russ Macy. He came from a fine family, but he drank too much. 4 months later, she married him, even though he drank and was 7 years her senior. She was sure his family disapproved of her because she was from the wrong side of the tracks. They had 2 daughters, but about 7 or 8 years after they were married, his drinking became so bad that she took her children and went home. Ethel said, I was still bitter because I felt the drink had completely ruined my childhood and my marriage. I hated everything pertaining to it. I was 25 then. I had never touched a drop. She didn't see Russ or hear from him for a whole year. At the end of the year, the children received a card from their father, which she kept and cherished. It said, tell mommy I still love her. Soon Russ himself arrived. She welcomed him with open arms, though he had little but the clothes on his back. He told her that he would never drink again, as she believed him. He got a job and went back to work and stayed dry for 13 years. By the end of the 13 years, their daughter was married. She and her husband were living with him. The older daughter was in her last year of high school. Then one night, the son-in-law and Russ went to a prize fight. Russ came home drunk, crawling on his hands and knees up the stairs. She told him, the children are raised. If this is the way you want it, this is the way we'll have it. Where you go, I'll go. What you drink, I'll drink. Thus, Ethel started drinking. They went on vacations in the car, drinking all the way. Ethel did the driving. One Sunday afternoon, she got picked up for drunk driving, and they threw both of them in jail. On another occasion, she got drunk and set the house on fire so they wouldn't have to paint it. Well, peace sakes, sounds fine to me. I'd do that. Ethel got upset with the religious neighbors down the street. They used a sound truck that they would stop out in front of the house. They'd sit out there and play these hymns. And I'd be lying there on that bed with this terrific hangover. If I'd had a gun, I'd shot the horns right off that thing. It would made me so raving mad. In 1940, they read something about AA in the newspaper. She talked about and thought there might come a time when they needed it. A man on the bar told her that they roll on the floor and they holler and they pull their hair. She says, well, I'm nuts enough now. And her hope died. On one day, Ethel told the woman bartender that she wished she had never take another drink and wanted help. She said, I thought no matter how crazy they are, I'll do anything they say to do. She was told to talk to Jack, the owner of the place, whom they always tried to buy a drink but refused, saying that he couldn't handle liquor. This may have been John Muni or one of the early Cleveland members. Finally, one morning, Ethel got in the car and cried all the way to the bar, told him that she was licked and wanted help. But Jack was out and his wife said she'd send him over as soon as he returned. He soon arrived with 2 cans of beer, one for Ethel and one for Russ. That was their last drink. Men from AA started coming to the house the next day telling their stories. Jack brought them the Saturday Evening Post story about AA. He told them the whole thing was based on the Sermon on the Mount and asked if they had a Bible. Coming off a drunk, it was hard to read the small print of that little testament that the bulldog had chewed up. But Russ said, Mother, if this tells us how to do it, you're going to have to read it. It was important to do the things we were told. Paul Stanley, His Truth Freed Me. His story is Truth Freed Me in the first edition. Visit it and stress that they read the book. Jack took them to a meeting at King's School on Wednesday night and introduced Ethel to some of the wives, and that meeting's still going on. One was Annabelle Gillum, the wife of Wally Gillum. His story was fired again in the first edition. Annabelle was told to take her under her wing. Women had a harder time being accepted in Akron than they did in New York. Perhaps the reason was that Ethel was accepted is that Russ joined at the same time. And also Ethel weighed about 300 pounds and the wives probably didn't consider her a threat. Her husband was about half her weight and only about 5'2", and they called him the pencil. Ethel gave a lot of credit to Dr. Bob and Ann for their recovery. She and Russ worked as a team and they were active from the beginning. Ethel started what may have been the first women's AA group. Russ died on Monday, September 4th, 1944, and was buried on Friday. AAs had invited Ethel to dinner the following Sunday. But first, Ethel went to talk to the women at St. Thomas Hospital. She recalled I sat down on the side of one of the beds and I started to weep, and I couldn't stop. I was so startled, and I apologized again and again for it. And that woman told me that long after that this was the surest proof that this program could work. If on Sunday I could be there trying to think of something that would help her with this problem, then we must have something that would work. After Russ's death, Ethel's whole life was AA, and she sponsored many women. She tells my story. In Ethel's parting words, AA has changed, but the root of it hasn't. We're older in AA, we're older in years. It's only natural that we don't have the capacity to change, but we ought not criticize those who do. Ethel Macy died on April 9th, 1963. Esther Elizardi, a flower of the South, Houston, Texas. Esther's date of sobriety was May 16th, 1941. She was a very attractive woman, full of pep. She was raised in New Orleans, where social drinking was acceptable. The first time she realized what alcohol could do for her was at her own wedding. She was so afraid that everything wouldn't be perfect, and she became very nervous and was in this really terrific state when her father said, "Miss Esther is about to faint. Get her something to drink." So oh God, get my tongue tangled on there. Esther wrote, Emma, the servant, came back with a water glass, big one, full of bourbon, made me drink it down. That bourbon hit just as I started down that aisle, and I walked down that aisle just like Mae West in her prime, and I wanted to do it all over again. From that day on, she used alcohol to ease the social situations and didn't know when she crossed over into the line of alcoholism. She divorced her husband after 7 years and went home to her parents. Couldn't stand living with them and went back to Texas and remarried her ex-husband. Then they moved to Oklahoma. In Esther's words, that's when all the boys and Esther got drunk and the wives didn't. The drinking got worse. Her husband would come home day after day to find her passed out. She was sent to a mental hospital where they kept her for 17 days. When they moved to Houston, the drinking continued. She went out one day to walk the Cocker Spaniel. A patrol car passed and saw her weaving and stopped to take her home, but she got sassy with him. So they took the dog home and took poor Esther to jail. Esther said, "I don't like being fenced in with those bars. You don't get hotel service." I remember going back on that bunk and crying my eyes out. I think that's when I hit bottom. She was only in there for a few hours when her husband came back with a look of disgust on his face, and he's going to get her out. And she was complaining about being in jail and how she's going to sue the city for what they had done to her. And he told her, "Remember, Esther, you're in jail, not at home." He had read a story about AA in Saturday Evening Post a few weeks before and showed it to her with the ultimatum: "If you'll try this thing, I'll go along with you. But if you don't, you'll have to go home. I cannot sit by and watch you destroy yourself." She wrote to the GSO office in New York, and she said, I was shaken. So I asked my husband to write the letter for him, but he said, "No, this is something I had to do all by myself." Within a week later, a letter came back with AA literature. It was a routine letter they sent to everyone, but with it was a handwritten note from Ruth Hawk, AA's non-alcoholic secretary. That personal touch did a lot to help Esther. The letter stated that this man would see her. There weren't any women. That man was in the hospital, so she drank for 5 more days before coming into AA the following week. She called out her spill into AA. Esther was full of gratitude to her husband, to the AA members who paved the way for her. During the second year in AA, they were transferred to Dallas and started up an AA group there in 1943. The number that in Dallas that Ruth Hawk had given her had been disconnected when she arrived, but unfazed, she started seeking out other alcoholics to 12-step. Esther had lived in Dallas from 1927 to 1932, according to a letter she wrote to New York dated March 29th, 1943, saying, "This is where I've been so sick for 5 years. This is where I'd start trying out all the doctors, hospitals, and cures, sanitarium 3 times. So I've lots to do. First off, 4 doctors to call on and let them look over me, Exhibit A. My minister has 2 prospects for us. He tried so hard to help me for years and never heard of AA. She had a hope I'll have much AA to report in my next letter. You'll be hearing from me." They did indeed. A week later, April 5th, she wrote, "Dear Bobby," Margaret R. Berger, Bill's secretary at the time, "New Dallas group met for the first time last night. 3 inactive alcoholics, 1 active alkie from Detroit, and 2 non-alcoholics who brought the active one. They met for some time in Esther's home." She said, "I threw myself into 12-step work, and what I feared to be a calamity turned out to be the most blessed of blessings." Esther ended her story with, "I feel there's no situation too difficult, none too desperate, no unhappiness too great to be overcome in this great fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I wish I could tell you how AA works, but I don't know. I only know that it does if you desire it with your whole heart and without reservation." Esther died on June 3rd, 1960, with slightly more than 19 years of sobriety. Her copy of the Big Book, which is signed by Bill Wilson, is on display at the Dallas Central office. Take time here. Countess Felicia Gazika, Stars Don't Fall, New York City. Felicia entered AA in 1943, but had several relapses her first year. Her date of sobriety was 1944. She's probably the 6th woman to get sober in New York. Marty Mann was her sponsor. Bill Wilson called Marty and said, "I have a dame down here whose name I can't pronounce, and I don't know what to do with her." Felicia was born in 1905 in the family castle in Blansko, or Blans, which is now part of the Czech Republic. She was the daughter of Count Josef Gazika, a fortune-hunting continental count from a noble Polish family, and Eleanor Medill Sissy Patterson, editor of the Washington Times. Her mother brought Felicia to America as an infant in 1908 and after her father had kidnapped her, and she never saw her father again until her early 30s, when her drinking became a problem and she lived in large houses with servants and all the luxuries she could possibly want. Prohibition meant nothing. Her family always bought the best. The embassies were flowing, but she never felt she belonged. She was married 3 times. First husband was to Drew Pearson, a newspaper man. Second husband was an Englishman who she divorced less than a year later. They both drank. Felicia said she used her venomous tongue. He used his fist. Third husband was the director of a men's recovery home in Virginia. She met her first husband again when she had been sober for 10 years and told her that he told her that he had always felt guilty because she'd become an alcoholic after the divorce, and she was able to tell him that she would have become an alcoholic anyway because she was just a sick person and unfit for marriage. She wrote, "Imagine my surprise when I came to in Europe and discovered I brought myself along. I began here and now to fear the answer to the question, what is the matter with me?" By 1943, she had moved to New York and was living a bohemian life in the village. Felicia said the horrors of increasing hangovers occupied the entire day with nausea, dry heaves, rocking bed, that nightmare-filled mind. Felicia remarked I was not beautiful or good as I'd once yearned to be. I was fat and bloated and unkempt. I was covered in bruises from running into doors. I wore a man's raincoat turned inside out. My tweed suit, once a nice, beautiful one, was now shapeless and baggy and bare places worn in the elbows from leaning on the bar, and I wanted to die. Felicia had the good fortune to find a new analyst, Dr. Ruth Fox. She said, I think now that a God in whom I did not believe was looking after me. Perhaps it was he who sent my analyst to a psychiatrist meeting at which Bill Wilson spoke. Dr. Fox told her about AA and asked her to read the big book. She finally encouraged Felicia to go to the AA Foundation office, which was down on the Wall Street district in New York, and talk to Bill Wilson. In Felicia's words, Bill was tall, gray hair with kind of asymmetrical good looks and pleasant, easy manner that inspired the confidence in the shaken and afraid. He was well dressed, he's easygoing. I could see he wasn't a quack or a fanatic. He said to me gently and simply, do you think you're one of us? Bill arranged for her to meet Marty Mann. I thought, aha, he's passing the buck. Now comes the questionnaire. Felicia recalled that Marty was late and said, I felt like a gangster's moll about to be interviewed by the Salvation Army, but Priscilla Peck answered the door. It was Marty and Priscilla who took her to her first meeting. In those days, there was only one big meeting a week in New York. Priscilla assigned Felicia to look after Anne, a rowdy newcomer whose idea of fun was to hit sailors and insult cops. She was so busy keeping Anne out of trouble and so scared that Anne would swing on her that she had her last 2 drinks that night. In her first year, she said, I kicked Priscilla in the shins, got the lock changed on the desk in the AA club. And because of secretary, I didn't want the intergroup secretary interfering. I took an older woman member out for lunch for the express purpose of informing her that she was a phony. She was a talented writer, and with Marty and Felicia helped start the AA Grapevine. Felicia had sunk low, but had not lost everything. And was one of the reasons that they started to talk about high bottom drunks. She concluded her story with AA has taught me how not to drink. And also on the 24-hour plan, it taught me how to live. Excuse me. She wrote an update of her story for the November 1967 Grapevine. It was signed FM, New Canaan, Connecticut. In it, she said she is disappointed to learn that her story being in the section, they stopped in time. She thought she had sunk pretty low. Felicia died on February 26, 1999, at the age of 92, a few months after giving an extensive interview about her friend Marty Mann to Marty's biographers, Sally and David Brown. I'm still working at getting a picture of Nancy Flynn, the independent blonde. I think I may have found somebody who has one, but for right now I don't have one. She's from New York City. Nancy came to AA in 1945 when she was 39 years old. She did not write her own story, which she claimed was written by some AA members, and she said she didn't even know it was in the big book. She left home at 14. Her mother died when she was 3. Her father remarried when she was 14, and her stepmother kicked her out. Nancy said, when you're thrown out, you don't feel like you're anything. You know, something's got to be wrong with you or they wouldn't have thrown you out. And they tell me that psychologically, I felt abandoned by my mother. All my life, I blamed everything that ever happened to me on someone else. And I thought I could usually find someone. I thought if I left my husband, things would be different. I never thought about changing myself, always thought about changing people or changing places. She had made a few geographic cures, but they didn't work. She kept quitting jobs. not having the courage to wait to be fired. Nancy wrote, I had heard about AA about a year before I came in, but I thought it was some organization that helped you out financially, and I was too independent for that. But on June 1st, 1945, I had lost all that kind of independence. Her contact with the AA was at the clubhouse on 334 and a half West 24th Street in New York. Nancy said, I got someone on the telephone and I told her I was in trouble and asked what should I do. The girl asked me if I could walk, and I said to myself, my God, how understanding. Somebody knows that you couldn't walk, and why? The girl said, well, the only reason I asked is if you can't, we'll come over and get you. And I reared up in all my arrogance and I said, you'll never come to me, but I'll go to you. It took me until 4 o'clock that day to get there. She expected to meet a bunch of bums, so she didn't get dressed up because she didn't want to look better than everybody else. When she arrived, there were a lot of Park Avenue types there. And then she said, I was so welcome. It was the first time I felt welcome. I didn't know who spoke first, last, or what, but somebody got up and said that he had been in Bellevue 35 times. And I thought, oh my God, I'll look like St. Cecilia here. One day a call came to the clubhouse for somebody to go out and do a 12-step job. And they looked at me and said, how long are you in? And I said, oh, a week or so. And they said, oh, well, you can't go. You have to be sober 3 months. And then I realized that here I'd spent all my life afraid that people were trying to get something out of me. And I had nothing to give. I had to wait until these people gave it to me before I could go out and give it away. She was impressed on coming into AA to meet a countess, Felicia Gazika, from Stars Don't Fall. At that time, Nancy had a little beauty shop, often gave permanence to members of AA, those who could afford to pay and those who could not. She and another woman, alcoholic, perhaps Marty Mann, were often asked to go out to hospitals and drying out places frequented by the wealthy. Because they were younger and presentable, they wore little hats with flowers on them, wore black dresses with pearls on these occasions. I was so eager to give what I had, she said. I went right from the first step to the last step. You see, I never cared for anybody before, not even myself. And when you care for somebody, you begin to heal yourself. And you don't even know it. She often went to Dr. Silkworth for advice. If we were in trouble, we'd go to Dr. Silkworth. If we were in a situation we didn't know how to get out of, we were afraid we might get drunk, we'd go over and talk it over with him. He was a very simple man, wonderful man. He said to me once, the day that you can sit down and just be honest with yourself in this situation, you will know what to do. That was the kind of man he was. Nancy went to the clubhouse every day from 11 o'clock in the morning when they opened until it closed at night. It was the only place she felt safe. Nancy ended her story with, the more I worry about me loving you, the less I'll worry about you loving me, and the happier I'll be. I have learned that the more I give, the more I will have. And the more I learn to give, the more I learn to live. For the first 5 years, she did nothing but go to AA. She didn't know what else to do. For 15 years, she attended a women's meeting that Marty Mann had started in a home on 58th Street in Midtown Manhattan. Marty wanted to hire her as a speaker for the National Council on Alcoholism, but she declined. Nancy's a good example of what people can accomplish after they get sober. She went to high school in her 50s, went to college when she was 70. She studied behavioral science. She went to college for 9.5 years and graduated cum laude. When she arrived in AA, she didn't believe in God. She didn't want to hear anything about it, but she began searching. Later, she became a Quaker and taught English to migrant workers. She lived in Pennsylvania and spoke at the 2000 AA International Convention in Minneapolis, and I got to be there. She passed away on April 16th, 2005, claiming 57 years of sobriety, although she drank twice during those 57 years. Drink time, speaking of drinking. Annie Kohlhaas, Annie the Cop Fighter, New York City. And unfortunately, if anybody has a picture of Annie, I'd sure like to have it for my collection here. In April of 1947, Annie arrived at age 67 years. 67 years old. She was a scrub lady for 25 cents an hour, poor and uneducated. She started to drink in 1913 at age 31 when women sat in the back room. Because of her drinking, her husband took the two small boys and left her. She said, "Didn't worry me a bit. I love the liquor. I love the crowd that I hung with. I would have done anything to get money for a drink." She got in a fight with a cop and tore the buttons off his uniform. When the cop said he was taking her in, she says, "Dude, you damn please." I was a tough piece of furniture in those days. If the almighty God had come down, I'd done the same thing to him. She was charged with molesting a policeman's uniform and got 5 days in the house of detention. She said, "The only thing I was worrying about is how that gang was making out without me, but they made out all right." I was in court again for drunken disorderly. 30 days, says the judge. I reared right up and I spit clean in that judge's eye. It was a distance of about 5 feet, too. Nuts, and another 30 days for spitting in the eye of the court. Nuts to you, says I. But I had to serve the whole 60 days. After being away from her family for 15 years, she is on her way to a speakeasy and met her husband. He asked her if she'd like a drink. She said, "Whoa, sure I would." So they had a few drinks at speakeasy and she went home with him. She couldn't stand the decent life and wanted to be a drunk and just kept on drinking. She gave her husband credit for raising her two sons. She said the youngest boy was going to be a policeman. Oh, brother. Well, it was all right. I had to take it. I had to accept it. But every time I thought of that uniform, it just killed me. She was obnoxious, stole change from the other customers, in black and blue from being kicked and knocked around. She drank with the guys and the gals on the Bowery, and her clothes, all the clothes on her body, were just filled with lice. Annie offered her old buddy Irene a drink, but Irene told her she couldn't take that first drink. Annie says, "Well, saints above, what happened to you?" "Well," says I, "nuts to you. I'm having mine." But Irene said she was going to get her yet. Annie replied, "Over my dead body." On May 12, 1946, she called Irene to take her down to where she went on Sunday night. So down to the old 43rd Street clubhouse, they went to the beginners meeting where she met Nancy Flynn, whose story in the big book is The Independent Blonde. Annie sobered up that night after 32 years of drinking. She said she never shook hands or said hello to anyone. She just ran in, ran out of meetings. After 8 months, she married another drunk, and after 8 months, she got in an argument with him and drank for 2 days. She said the nosy AAs caught up with me somehow. This damn organization knows my whole business. Nobody ever stepped over my territory before in my whole life. She said, "I don't know what AA does to you, but you can never drink again the same way." She was sent to High Watch Farm for 2 days and returned a new woman. Nancy encouraged Annie to take her fifth step with the priest. She told the priest, "Father, I'll tell you everything, but don't ask me how many times. She cursed a lot when she spoke, but then she'd say to the priest in the audience, she'd say, "Excuse me, Father, but I'm trying to be careful." Nancy was a hairdresser, and same as I was. When Annie came to the beauty shop, she would charge her $1 because she never wanted to think that Annie gave her anything. Annie was very proud. Annie later went to another beauty parlor, and when they charged her $6, she says, "Hell, I can get it done for $1 up on Park Avenue." Annie concluded her story with gratitude for what AA had done for her. Her boys were back in her life, and she exclaimed, "I live on the 24-hour plan. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I don't mind the name of an alcoholic because I was called a son of a this and a son of a that. And alcoholic is a good enough name for me." To the newcomers, I say, go to meetings. And God take care of each and every one of you. Annie Colehouse died when she was about 74. Freedom from bondage, my favorite. Win Quorum Laws, Ventura, California. Young when she joined, this AA believes that her serious drinking was the result of even deeper defects. She tells here how she was set free. Wynne joined AA in California on July 25th, 1947, at age 33. She was described by the novelist Carolyn C., one of her several stepchildren, as a knockout beauty. She believed her alcoholism was a symptom of deeper trouble and that her mental and emotional difficulties began many years before she drank. But AA taught her that she was the result of the way she reacted to what happened to her as a child. She learned that she could change this reaction pattern and match calamity with serenity. Bill Wilson's mother, Emily, divorced his father, Gilman, when he and his sister Dorothy were raised by the maternal grandparents. Wynne was born in Florida, and her parents separated when she was a child, and she was sent to live in poverty with her grandparents in the Midwest. This common childhood experience may have been one of the reasons for the reported close friendship that she had with Bill Wilson. She reports feeling restlessness, anxiety, fear, and insecurity. The only kind of insecurity I knew anything about at the time was material security, and I decided that all these feelings would vanish immediately if only I had a lot of money. She married and divorced 4 times before coming into AA. She said, "I didn't have the courage to love, wasn't even sure I had the capacity." First time she married was for financial security. Her second husband was Stan Kenton, a prominent band leader. She sang with his band. A third husband was an army captain. She married during World War II. Her fourth husband was a widower with several children. One AA friend quipped that AA was a cinch for the program because she had always been interested in mankind. She was just taking them one man at a time. Wynne stated, "I was obsessed with self and I was immersed in self-pity and resentment. My remorse and shame and humiliation when I was sober was almost unbearable. As soon as my day was finished, I could drink myself into oblivion. I knew it didn't make any difference where I started. The inevitable end would be Skid Row." Wynne wrote, "I attended my first AA meeting on July 25th, 1947. I take no sedation or narcotics, for this program to me is one of complete sobriety." and I no longer need to escape reality. I believe too that it's equally impossible to practice these principles to the best of our ability a day at a time and still drink free. I don't think the two things are compatible. A willingness to believe is enough for a beginning. When she wrote her story, she'd been in AA for 8 years. Her life had changed dramatically. She had not had a drink since her first meeting and had not only found a way to live without having a drink, but a way to live without wanting to drink. Sometime after 1955, I'm sorry, I had missed Stan Kenton here. When her story appeared in the big book, she married her fifth husband, George Laws, another AA member. George and Wynne were married for several years, and his daughter, Carolyn, lived with them for a while. Carolyn said George and Wynne were a popular team speaking at meetings. My dad was Wynne's opening act. He couldn't help but be funny. Then he would defer to Wynne, whose tale was hair-raising. According to Carolyn, Wynne began carving out a career seeking men and money and started drinking to bridge that gap between reality that she was born into and that dream of the American romance that she yearned for. Wynne said in her story that she didn't know how to love. Fear and rejection and its ensuing pain were not to be risked. When she found alcohol, it seemed to solve her problems for a time, but jails and hospitals followed. She's full of resentments and fears. An article by a prominent clergyman helped her with a 25-year resentment against her mother. He said, in effect, if you have a resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or the thing that you resent, you will be free. If you will ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, you will be free. Ask for their health, their prosperity, their happiness, and you will be free. Even when you don't really mean it and you don't want it for them, your prayers are only words, go ahead and do it anyway. Do it every day for 2 weeks. You'll find that you have come to mean it and to want it for them. And you will realize that where you used to feel bitterness, resentment, and hatred, you now feel compassionate, understanding, and love. I call that the 2-week diet prayer. And if I miss a day, I have to start over. That prayer saved my first husband's life. Wynne gave us these precious gems such as these. If I'll have peace of mind, exact proportion to the peace of mind I give to the life, bring to the lives of other people. And everything I get in Alcoholics Anonymous, I get everything I need in Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything I need, I get. And when I get what I need, I am invariably fine. It's just what I wanted all the time. Wynne and Jack P. of Los Angeles started more than 80 meetings in hospitals, jails, and prisons in Southern California from about 1947 to 1950. Jack P. reports that during this period, they were widely criticized by other members of the fellowship who felt like this was something that AA should not be doing. And look at us now. Carolyn wrote, AA can be said to have worked for my father and for Wynne. Although they would divorce, neither of them would ever drink again. Wynne was the girl who lost nearly all, but changed, improved, and transformed thousands of lives. She apparently died of cancer on December 17th, 1974, at age 60. These stories from the first 3 editions of the big book, actually 2, can be found in the conference-approved book, Experience, Strength, and Hope. That's this book. You get it from the AA General Service Office, IAA.org. I hope you have enjoyed learning about these 9 incredible pioneer women of Alcoholics Anonymous as much as I have. Thank you for allowing me to share this bit of history with you today. And I am going to end my show and get back to you.
Wow, Nancy, that was just fabulous. Thank you so much. And just really just blow me away, man. That was the second time I heard that talk, and it was better the second time than the first. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. I'm so glad you could be with us tonight. You your service is well thanked, and I'm sure that from the chats that I saw coming in, they were very congratulatory. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and on this special program.
Okay, so we're going to be closing here shortly. I got a couple of things that I'd like to share with everybody. First off, next week, January 16th is a date you will not want to miss. Next to my wife, two of my most favorite women in all of Alcoholics Anonymous. Michelle Mirza, our GSO archivist, is going to be sharing some of Dr. Bob's letters with us. And I'm telling you, you don't want to miss that one. And then Gail, the Akron archivist and the current archivist for Dr. Bob's house, is going to be sharing the Akron story with us. And she's the driving force behind why we're all here tonight. She is just a dear friend, and I appreciate her being here this week with us and being here next week to share with us. Again, you won't want to miss it. Let me see here. Daniel, could you share the QR codes one more time? While the contributions continue to keep the house open and maintained, we want to share something more important than contributions. Please continue to share the miracle that happened in Akron over 85 years ago, and visit for yourself. Bring a sponsee, maybe. Before we let you go, we just want to take a minute to share our gratitude for your support and allowing us to participate in this wonderful event. We are blessed to visit Dr. Bob's house each year and to see in person what your contributions have done. A special thank you to our presenters, Harmon and Nancy, tonight. Thank you. Thank you for your service and support of Dr. Bob's house. We have been taught that for there to be a God consciousness, there must be a committee. All the committee members have included on their note their name badges that they're committee members. Couldn't have done this without you. They all worked great behind the scenes tonight. And I just really want to thank them all for keeping everything running smoothly. Save the date for next week again, January 16th, 2021. And there is one special person that we have not heard from yet today. Dr. Bob, will you please join us? I know he's coming. No audio. There's no audio, Daniel.
And I will introduce one of our co-founders, Dr. Bob's. My good friends in AA and of AA, I feel I would be very remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to welcome you here to Cleveland, not only to this meeting, but those that have already transpired. I hope very much that they have the presence of so many people and the words that you have heard will prove an inspiration to you, not only to you, but And may you be able to impart that inspiration to the boys and girls back home who are not fortunate enough to be able to come. In other words, we hope that your visit here has been both enjoyable and profitable. I get a big thrill out of looking over a vast sea of faces like this with the feeling that possibly some small thing that I did a number of years ago played a small part in making this meeting possible. I also get quite a thrill when I think that we all had the same problem. We all did the same things. We all got the same results in proportion to our zeal and enthusiasm and stick-to-itiveness. If you will pardon the injection of a personal note at this time, let me say that I've been in bed 5 of the last 7 months, and my strength hasn't returned as I'd like, so my remarks will of necessity be very brief. But there are 2 or 3 things that flashed into my mind on which it would be fitting to lay a little emphasis. One is the simplicity of our program. Let's not louse it all up with Freudian complexes and things that are interesting to the scientific mind but have very little to do with our actual AA work. Our 12 steps, when simmered down to the last, resolve themselves into the words love and service. We understand what love is, and we understand what service is. So let's bear those 2 things in mind. Let us also remember to guard that erring member of the tongue. And if we must use it, let's use it with kindness and consideration and tolerance. And one more thing, none of us would be here today if somebody hadn't taken time to explain things to us, to give us a little pat on the back, to take us to a meeting or two, to have done numerous little kind and thoughtful acts in our behalf. So let us never get the degree of smug complacency so that we're not willing to extend or attempt to that help that has been so beneficial to us to our less fortunate brothers. Thank you very much.
And I'd just like to close this session with the Lord's Prayer for all who wish to join in. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. May God bless you in Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you all very much. We'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Nancy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Harmon. Thank you, Nancy. Get out of this chair. Look. Thanks, my house is killing me.